first question is related to how you were started public service in general. So when you were describing your experience, was this for a county board first?
No,
Or
I
how did
first
you?
ran for city council. There was an open seat. There were 8 members at that time. The 3 at-large seats were up. One of them was an open seat. So I ran for an open seat with 15 other candidates. Our city had gotten rid of primaries, so all 15 of us ran against each other, and the top 3 ultimately would get the seat. I did not end up in that top 3. I was number 5, but with a very short period of time to run the race, and I raised almost no money. But we walked about 6,000 or 7,000 doors in that race.
Wow.
And it was very impressive for someone who came out of nowhere. Now, there's another unique thing to that is that I was a military spouse. So our place of residency was the state of Illinois, but I was not, prior to that, living in the state of Illinois. I was living in Washington state. So the law says you have to live in the area a year before you run, but because that is our home address, that's our permanent residence. So I was considered a resident of the state of Illinois. So it was also kind of baffling because people were like, she literally just moved back here. How is she running for office? And so I had literally no name recognition. Nobody knew who I was. And so to be able to come in 5th, it shows the power of knocking doors. And I think every race I've run since then has shown that. The big difference in that race is that it was nonpartisan, and every race I've run since has been partisan. So if anyone is running a nonpartisan race, I think there's some differences that we can discuss. But by and large, running a partisan race is a little bit easier if you are in a Democratic area.
Well, that's helpful. So you went from knowing no one to creating a whole community of people, and that's amazing. So our group here does help out a lot with first-time candidates and people running for smaller races. So with your experience, when you got on the ballot there and made a community, how did you do that? That's a huge thing for a group like us.
So I will tell you, there was nothing graceful about it. I felt very awkward. I would go at that time, my kids were very young. They were 6 years old. So I would go anywhere with my kids, they were in dance class. I'd walk around and talk to the moms at the dance class and say, hey, I want to run. This is the issue I'm running on. I would, outside of my kids' school, the first time I had to get that first signature, I was like, oh my God, I cannot do this. Because I walked up to a complete stranger and was like, hi, I know you don't know me, but will you sign my petition to run for office? And they're looking at me like, what? And I didn't know what to say. And then I started learning I had to get signatures in certain areas. So I felt like I did everything wrong. I'd go up to complete strangers and be like, do you live here? Nobody wants to tell you where they live. I'd say, do you live in Joliet? Do you live in Shorewood? Stuff like that. And people were very standoffish. So after that first week of getting signatures, I thought, I don't think I can do this. This is a lot harder than I ever thought it would be to just, ask strangers to get involved. But what I had to do was change my mindset. I really started to think about, I'm not running just to run. I'm running because I want our government to be, something people believe in and have faith in and understand that our taxes are services for us. And so when I started reshaping that message and having real conversations with people about those things, it became a lot easier. And over time, what you find is like-minded people. Other people believe the same things. I don't take any corporate PAC dollars. I never have. I never will. So that was one thing that I would lead with too, is like, I want our government to be responsible to the voters. I don't want them to be bought and paid for. And I don't think that people should take dollars where they have to vote, a conflict of interest later on. And so I made that promise to people. And I said, this is what I want our government to be. And I'm going to be the change I want to see. That resonates with people. So then we just started building a group. And as more people were like, yeah, I believe in that, I want to get you elected, I just asked them, will you volunteer for me? Will you help me walk doors? Will you phone bank? And, I didn't know how to do any of these things myself either. Walking doors was the thing my dad taught me. So we did a lot of that in my first race. I don't think I phone banked anybody. We had like 1 or 2 fundraisers, which like no turnout. But then the phone banking I did was calling my friends and family and people I knew all over the country and asking them to donate. And I was surprised at how few people donated. Many of them who I had known for years were like, yeah, we're not really political, and didn't want to give me any money. So it was a process of learning. I think that continuing to keep the mindset of what they're investing in. So I worked in the gaming industry for 10 years before I became a senator. And we have a thing called kickstarting, where you can crowdsource or crowdfund a project and then deliver on it. So I use that same terminology. I was like, we literally need to kickstart our government and start investing in the policies that we believe in. And if we leave it up to the big corporations and the special interests, they get the government they want. But we as Americans have to kickstart, $5, $25 a month, whatever you can afford, into the candidates you believe in, so you can start being heard as well. And again, I think that resonated with people, and it changed the perception of what they were really paying for.
Amazing. So when you took the leap from a local government to a state government, did you use the same type of techniques for fundraising and communication and connecting with people?
Yeah, so there was a lot that I learned in the process. So the first year I ran for city council, about 7 months later, I ran for the county board as a partisan race. I did win that seat. It was a crowded primary, and then I was the top vote getter, and then I won in the general as well. About a year and a half later, I ran for Congress. Again, not on my platform. I allowed some people to talk me into it because I truly believe we need universal health care. That was my driving reason to want to run. I was actually trying to find another candidate to challenge my congressperson when I somehow got roped into it instead. I definitely learned a lot from a national standpoint in that, but I really perfected how we did stuff and how important it was to gather data. So if you're a PC and you're out there knocking doors, collecting people's email addresses and their phone numbers, asking what issues were important. We collected so much data on my race, and then it really helped because when we went back and called those people to get out to vote, we had their contact information. If we knew things about them, I was able to ask, whatever was in the notes. It would remind me of the people we had talked to, and I could, have that personal touch. And I think that's really important for politics. We've gotten so away from the one-on-one conversations that it becomes more about how many mailers can we get in the mail, how much toxic, messaging can we put out there? How can we fear people into voting? And I don't subscribe to any of that. I think it's really important for people to be engaged and invested in what's happening. And the only way that's going to happen is if you reach them at their level. So we learned a lot of that on my congressional race. I brought in 42% of the vote. I only raised $65,000. My opponent had $5 million. So that was an incredibly close win. Of all the people who didn't win that year, I had the second highest vote total in the country. So it shows you how much that one-on-one conversation makes a difference. And then, so I had a lot of pressure for me to run for Congress again. A lot of national groups wanted me to run. And at that point, they had redrawn the district lines. And I felt like I was going to have to redo all that work all over again, possibly to only get the same percentage. And I thought, I can't do this to my family. I sacrificed so much. At that time, there was an open seat in the Senate. John Connor, who filled the seat before me, decided to run for judge. So I think if you are going to run for an open seat, it is so important to announce your candidacy early. If you are sure you want to run, it's important to try to be that first person because you will be considered the front runner, and you want to hold on to that the whole time. It's much easier when people are like, oh, you're running against Rachel, instead of, the other way around. And if you announce first and you put it in people's head that you're running, the rest of the party then will just, you fill the vacuum. And then everybody else has to compete with you. So that's what I did. Is like the day John Connor announced he was running for judge, I called the party chair and said, I want to run for this seat. I had already decided that morning, coincidentally, that I was not running for Congress. And so I think that taking that step, and I had considered running for a state seat, but at that time I was like, everyone who's in these seats, I don't have an issue with. I wouldn't challenge them. I don't think you should challenge a seat just to, especially for the Democratic side. If it's a Republican, that's a different story. Just to do it, I think you need to really the incumbent really needs to have done something egregious or have failed to live up to the platform of the Democratic Party. That's my personal belief. And at that time, none of the state people I had that big of issue with. There were, of course, votes I didn't agree with them on, but it wasn't enough to really challenge someone in that seat. So when he stepped down, I took the opportunity to jump at it. And I think that's important because, you know, Aaron, you probably know this, and maybe others here too, but the party at the highest level does really protect their seats. You know, the other House members are helping other House members and the other senators are helping the other senators. So it's a tight group.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to challenge an incumbent because of that.
True. But you did win, and you're here.
I did. I did. And it wasn't an easy race for sure. And the other side was very vicious. And I knew going in that could be the possibility. We were prepared for it. I refused to send a negative mailer out. And in fact, after the 20th negative mailer went out about me, I finally sent a response mailer saying that everybody wants me to go negative, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep talking about the issues, and I'm going to stand on my record. And we got phone calls from that mailer saying, thank goodness, like somebody who's finally serious about, you know, what's happening in our district.
I think that resonated a lot. And when you started, it was pretty clear you had a lot of great ideas and you got them from your constituents, and you were trying to deliver that right away. And it kind of, I'll put it out there in public because you're doing this too. You ruffled a lot of feathers, and we needed that. And you made some bridges with the other side that were needed. And I think you really helped out this whole session, to be honest. And your leadership right away, I was very impressed with. And you're talking with little folks like us, so thanks. So
one thing I would say is I always treat people as a human being first. And if you go in with that mindset in mind, it changes the dynamic. If I go in thinking, oh, this is a Republican or this is a them or, you know, the others, you go in with a negative mindset. If you go in with what do we have in common, right? I mean, the first thing is we're all human beings. You might have a whole lot else in common. You know, I'm a mother, so there's Republicans who are mothers. There's Democrats who I don't agree with some of their policy. You know, we have things in common, or common friends or common issues. And to me, it's like, if we can find a way to walk forward together, even if it's only a few steps, let's take those few steps. When we finally get to that brick wall, then we can hammer it out. But I think there's a lot of progress that needs to happen in Illinois. And I guess what I do is I put my ego aside and say, we need to stop being petty. We need to stop taking the pop shots or the low blows at each other and really start to say, where can we compromise on this and where can we move it forward? And there have been other great legislators who come before me who do this. But right now, I think we're seeing in our country such a divide between R&D. And I walk and hit some Republican doors, especially in the general elections, but even in the primary, if they're, you know, voted Democrat 2 times ago and then voted Republican, I want to know why. I go and ask them, you know, and I try to make that connection and say, well, what is it that you want to see? And I'll tell you, the number one thing that people tell me is that they don't think either side makes a difference. They don't think if you vote Republican or Democrat, anything changes for them. The status quo remains the same. The struggles of paying their bills remain the same. And they want to see some real change that impacts their lives.